you actually have to learn, like CIA does not carry guns. We did learn firearms, but that was only because I was in security for a brief stint.
Right.
But most of the people there, they don't know how to use a gun. It's not like Hollywood, but FBI and DEA and those, you actually do. And you have a skill that, is important. I'm not saying there aren't skilled people at the CIA, but just remember when I said I wanted to learn ethical hacking, they had no idea what I was talking about.
What do you mean by that?
When I was getting ready to either resign or get another assignment, which I had wanted to get another assignment, I asked if there was some way I could do some ethical hacking training because I really wanted to get into something more specific where I'd have a skill. And the people that in the management just had no idea what that was. I know some people there do know what it is.
What is it? I don't know what
agency.
it is.
It's when you learn how to hack, but you're on the good side of it. You're not doing like the hacking for bad reasons. You're doing it for like security.
Ooh, but
reasons.
Who determines what's good and bad? Hey there, welcome back to another episode of American Snippets. I'm your co-host, Barb Allen. Look, I always say this, and then I always say this, but here I go again saying it. I love meeting the guests that we meet. I love getting into their stories. I love all the lessons we learn and the insights and perspectives on life that I gain from every single guest that we interview. And today's guest is someone, I think we've only interviewed one other person, and that is someone that she knows and works with as well, Ron Hammond, who has experience in the same branch that she does. But Shelley Mateer is a former CIA officer. I think Ron told me the word you used, the officer, correct?
Officer.
Yeah. I said agent, like like the movies, right? CIA officer. And she spent a long time in this government branch, branch of service, as a young single woman. And as you all know, any woman who knows in a competitive field, especially one that tends to be male dominated, that comes with certain challenges. So I think that alone shows some guts and bravado that she just held her own in this crazy field. And I don't know about you, but I had my own perceptions based on really zero facts of what it would be like to work in the CIA. And then I read Shelley's book, titled Single in the CIA, and what an eye-opener that was. And I love in the book, Shelley did not go into specifically like jobs and assignments that she was on, but really more about what life was like as somebody who worked for this government branch of service. And we're going to get into all of that today and more because Shelley is also very outspoken, well-written on current events in our country. She is a prominent part of Ops Lens, which we are proud to be affiliated with and work with as well. And we're going to get into what it's like to be a young single woman working in the CIA and what that lifestyle entails, and the pros and cons of service, or advice for anybody who's maybe willing to get into service and serve their country in any capacity, and what the heck is going on in this country today from someone with a unique perspective of having worked in the CIA. Shelley, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get into it and let's talk a little bit. Let's go through some of what you have in your book, which I did read and I really, really enjoyed, but it was so surprising to me. I think one of the biggest things that struck me about your book is that I think I expected more of people who work in the CIA than what it appeared to be based on what I read in your book. Like I was surprised to hear about the infighting. I mean, politics is everywhere. Politics is on your school board, on your PTA, you can't do anything with more than two people that politics doesn't get involved. But the extent to which that got involved in the office nuances and the day-to-day life, and some of your supervisors that you talked about and the behavior they displayed, it was really sort of shocking to me that this could that
Yeah.
that could happen to such a degree in there. So let's just talk a little bit about when you got started. First off, what prompted you to decide, hey, I think I'm going to go join the CIA? Because for a lot of people, especially young women, like you might think that, but it seems like, hey, I'm going to run off to Hollywood and be a movie star, like one of those like kind of
Yeah.
fantasy things. But you
Well,
actually did it.
yeah. It was similar to that, actually. I had the idea of being James Bond, or at the time, I think Men in Black was the movie out in college. And my family was all government, but not CIA. So I wasn't really the law enforcement type where probably couldn't bust down a door. I'm not very aggressive, like really. So I chose the CIA. I guess because I've traveled a lot as a kid. We lived overseas, and I liked foreign languages, so I just got a degree in international relations and thought I want to work for the CIA.
Is that how, did you know that that degree would be helpful in that career choice, or were you just kind of
Mm.
guessing?
Well, it was kind of guessing. I probably should have gone into being a lawyer. It seems like they like lawyers a lot now, but
Really?
I didn't know that. Yeah, when I can explain better. But I came in actually older than most. I was 28, no 29,
Oh, old
and
lady.
right. But most of the people coming in after me were like 22,
Wow.
25, but they all had law degrees. I have a bachelor's degree in international relations, and at the time, a bachelor's degree was what I guess now almost a master's degree is. And I forget where I was going with that, but the although lawyer kids seem to get much more respect, obviously, but
Really?
I yeah, the idea was international relations. You would go into either the Department of State or CIA or.
Okay.
Mm.
So you get this degree. How do you actually go about applying to work for the CIA?
Well, they have CIA.gov, and I'm sure they still do the same types of things. You can apply online, or they have recruitment events at colleges. I think they go out. I was never at one of those. I was in California, and there really wasn't much of that, I don't think, out there at the time. When I got out of college, they weren't hiring at all, but I just tried and tried. I tried for 7 years.
You tried for
Um,
7 years to get into the
yeah,
CIA. What were
yeah.
you
When
doing in the
I
meantime?
Well, I graduated, and I think I started applying before I graduated.
Okay.
And then I went to work at first at a record store because no one in California knew what international relations was. So it didn't matter that I had a degree. I couldn't really get a job. But I did. I worked at a record store, and then I worked at a place in Sacramento for a while that tracks legislation. It used to be called StateNet. Now it's LexisNexis bought them out, but that comes into play now because I know more about the way the legislatures work than I ever would have known. I know how a bill gets through the legislature, and because I used to track different states, and
All right.
I
So
did
that's
that for
good.
3 years. Yeah.
So I know we have a audience and community is heavily invested in the state of this country and how things are going and all this. And probably most of them understand this as well. But in case we have somebody who's hopping on who is not quite clear, and I'm going to be straight up honest, like I don't know that I could actually lay out the specifics of how that goes to. So are you able to give like the 1, 2, 3, 4 step, like
Sort
map out
of.
the steps for
Yeah.
that bill to become a law?
Yeah, it's been a while, and different state legislatures have more complications than others. But a bill is introduced. Sometimes it's pre-filed. They pre-file like hundreds of them in some states, thousands. In like New Jersey, I used to track New Jersey. They did thousands, and it gets introduced by the legislator, and then it goes through the process. It goes to committees sometimes. Sometimes it gets amended. Sometimes it goes, so it's multiple steps.
Yeah.
And then it goes to the other house. Now, I could have this wrong in some states. I think some states only have one house. But if you have a house and an assembly, no, an assembly and a Senate, sorry,
Yeah.
it's been over 10 years. But it has to go to the other house, has to be approved by that house, or it gets sent back, and then it might get amended, or
Right.
it can be killed, and then eventually it gets to the governor, and if the governor signs it, it's law. So,
What
you know.
is to you one of the things that is so freaking maddening to me as just a regular citizen is when I see, and this happens on either side of the aisle, is that when there's a bill up for discussion, up for debate, right? And all these other things are, like the voting bill, or for instance, and instead of just dealing with the voting bill, all
Mhm.
these other things that have nothing to do with voting are attached to this,
Yes.
like sending money to, I don't know,
Mhm.
Pakistan for something or whatever it is, right? All these things that have nothing to do with the primary bill of focus are attached. And it almost seems as if that's done to sink the first bill or force people to get through. And it just seems like a colossal waste of time.
Mhm.
Would you have any thoughts or opinions or insight on, like, is there some kind of policy or rule, or what do you think of creating some sort of policy or rule that you have to have standalone bills, or there's a limit? Like, is there any limit
Yeah.
to how many bills you can lump together?
I there probably should be. I would imagine there might be in certain states, but um, I don't know, because I know what you're talking about. But that's just
Yeah.
a way to sneak a pet project in, probably. I mean, it
What
as we've seen.
what do you
Mm.
say to people who, or what would you offer out to people who get so pissed off? Like, the infrastructure bill is up there now, right? And
Mhm.
everyone knows where I stand, so I'm not even going to really pretend to like dance around this because I'm not a dancer, anyway, right? But um, the left has attached human infrastructure to, roads and trains and airports or
Mhm.
whatever that all is. And I think that's a bunch of garbage. That's the way to get in all the crap that they want to get in.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Do you disagree with that? Do you like the human infrastructure part? Or do you think it's a big deal? I'm just interested in like your own
Yeah.
personal
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, infrastructure to me means let's work on the hospitals, let's work on the airports and the roads and the bridges. Those need more help, I think, than all the other things. Um, but I'm not an engineer, but I would imagine that in this country, they all need a lot of work. So the other parts of it, I would say let's maybe separate that out. I haven't looked at all that stuff. I try to block it out, honestly, because it's just too depressing.
Yeah, and you
But
know what? I hear that a lot. I hear that more and more and more and more, and I get it. I did that too for a while. I also think that because we all blocked it, we all did that, and we're all
Mhm.
a lot of us are still doing it now. I think that's what got us here, right? I remember,
Mm.
and I use this example all the time, but it's the one that just comes to my head, and it's the one that is most glaring to me. My fiance, my boys, and I, we walked in Trump's inaugural parade with an organization that was hosting families of fallen service members to do so. So we got to walk in Trump's inaugural parade, and we saw, we were taken off of some streets because there were riots and people were burning cars and stuff. And we were like, well, that's just
Mhm.
idiotic. And then we saw the next day all like the thousands of women who were so offended at Trump's use of one word, they came down to
Mhm.
DC with vagina hats, and they were
Yeah.
wearing vagina hats,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, these people are just straight up crazy. Like
Yeah.
the irony in them protesting a word that they say is vulgar by wearing something that is, could be construed as vulgar is just, how can anybody not see that? And I just made the assumption that the idiocy and the hypocrisy behind that would speak for itself, and that's where that movement would die. I thought
Mhm.
the vagina hats would be the death of that movement. And so
No.
I let it go. I sat back and I was like, I paid attention to some extent and
Yeah.
watched, but I just assumed that other people would be taking care of this and would see this. But that's not what happened, right? That
No.
all that happened is that those people got more powerful, more powerful, more loud. And now here we are today
Yeah.
living in this world that many of us don't recognize. So I sort of
Yeah.
feel like we all have to pay attention. We all have to start
Right.
reading things. We don't all have to read all the bills, but we should read some of them. We should
Right.
skim them and get
Yeah.
some sort of understanding. I certainly don't know, I know there's much, much more that I don't know than I do know, but I'm at least trying
Yeah.
to kind of research
Well,
and
yeah.
educate. But I hear you. It is depressing and it is that.
I
But
more mean like I don't watch the mainstream media
oh yeah, yeah.
anymore, pretty much at all. I mean, I just kind of see what happened with a lot of people I know in their say 40s, who, and mostly women with no children, who they were, as soon as I was writing articles for Opslands, by the way, that even touched on subjects that they didn't like, which is mostly I was writing about the state that California was in, because I had gone back to live there, but that's a long story. I was writing about the state that California is in, which, by the way, would be the state the whole country's in if you let it go that way.
Yeah.
It's not good. And I was writing about children, like what we were going through with the lockdowns, which was much worse in California than anybody even knows. And my poor children suffered because of it, very much suffered.
Yeah.
So trust me, I am extremely active in that. But I have to do things from a background, like a sort of anonymous way sometimes, um, for other reasons. So,
Yeah.
but when I do things from the background, because I figure all these people whining, complaining, I honestly think there's more people on the other side who don't agree. But
Yes.
then you get those people that say, oh, this is all conspiracy theory. I got accused by a family member of being what was it, QAnon? I didn't even know what they were talking about. I was like, who's that? I have no idea. But so there's that certain segment
Yeah.
of mostly people who are doing pretty well, who like working at home because they don't have to commute and pay the $6 gallon gas in California, which, by the way, that's what it's
Unbelievable.
always been. It's been
Wow.
4 to 6 in certain
Wow.
areas. But they like it kind of because they got to stay home. I never was like that. I always cared about if other people were suffering. Like, what about the kids with autism? What about the
Mhm.
kids that are deaf? What about, there's just so many other things. I'm not saying I have that problem, but someone else does. So I always stood up for those other people more than myself. And I find it kind of disgusting that a lot of these people were only about themselves and how it affects them and their family. And if it doesn't affect them, they don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going around too. I have also been accused of that, of only caring
Mhm.
about myself. I have been accused, when I would point out things like, we can't continue to let millions of people pour through our borders, and then we as Americans can't absorb their cost of their medical care and their housing, while, by the way, granting them the right to vote and giving them free licenses. But then, no, you can't
Mhm.
have a license to vote because that's racist, but we're going to give these illegal people and we're going to let them vote. Like, insane. And I would try to point out that that's just not sustainable, that the
Yeah.
American taxpayer cannot continue to carry that burden because we're getting squashed. And man, did I get a few new holes ripped in me by people who just told
Yeah.
me what a horrible, selfish person I am, because all
Yeah.
I care about is my finances and my income, and shame on me, and I'm the problem and all this stuff. And it's like, there's
Mhm.
really no logic being displayed,
Yeah.
and no willingness to listen to all the points, because I think anybody would understand that there's a limit. There is a limit to resources, and right,
Yeah.
in saying that you can't continue to have millions of people pour in and have this many people supporting this many people, that's going to grow to this many people being supported by this many people. It's not sustainable.
No. And well,
But
I think it's funny that they won't let Cubans in because
oh
mostly
my God.
probably because they'd vote Republican.
Right.
And also, I have friends from Europe, like Switzerland, trying to come in. They won't let them come in to spend money here to be tourists, but
Wow.
they'll let people in the border, like just randomly. And we don't know where they're coming from.
Right. And by the way, they're not being forced to be vaccinated either, but
Yeah.
there's legislation in discussion to force Americans to be vaccinated. Like,
Yeah. Well, they're
what is
forcing a lot of
happening?
Europeans are
Yes.
being forced already. They're already vaccinated. Most, so this is a vaccinated person coming from, say, let's just pull out Switzerland,
Right.
and they can't even get in. And it just it doesn't. None of it makes any sense. But as soon as you bring that up, that certain pocket gets very upset. And
Yes.
but I still think the majority out there, they don't know what to do, and maybe they're waiting for their vote to count. I don't know. Let's
Well,
just
we're going to
hope.
wait a long time unless we don't fix
I
it.
know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but you
So,
can't talk about that either.
oh, no.
So we
Oh,
don't want
no.
to go there.
But we do anyway,
Right. Right.
because like you have to talk about it. Like
I know.
what do we do? And now you've been all over the world for the
Mhm.
CIA. Can you compare and contrast life that you've seen in other countries versus life in America?
Yes.
Pros and cons, like things that are
Yeah.
better in other countries that you think America could benefit from, or things in America that are, far better or whatever you want to call it that than you see
Yeah.
in other countries.
Well, the countries I went to were mostly either Latin America or it would be Eastern Europe. So, in those countries, I would say the things they do better are they're just more. The people usually are. I hate to say it, but they're more educated than the average American. They just know more history. They care more about things that like we're talking about. Some people don't care in the United States. And I don't think we learn enough history and geography and things about I don't know, bigger picture things. I don't think we learn enough in this country in our public schools basically. But in Europe, I would say that I found much more educated people that just got what you were saying without even saying it. Just I don't know what you call that, but there was more of that. And then I didn't go to these countries because obviously I would stand out like a sore thumb, but there were certain countries in the Middle East that I worked with the people that would come out of.
Right.
And I would say that those countries, without naming names, um, they went from women being free, having careers, being doctors, professionals, allowed to go to school, to just basically one day. I'm sure it happened over a short span of time. They all of a sudden you got to wear a burqa, you have to cover up, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't drive, you can't go to school. And when this came out in California and they started with the mask mandates, which I'm very much against, um, it was I think the second county in the nation that mandated masks, and there was no reason for it. We were in the middle of the Mojave Desert. There was nothing around us. There were no cases. And by the way, cases does not equal deaths, right? So I just didn't understand, but there was complete hysteria around me. And I likened it to these countries where these women all of a sudden have to cover up. Like, what's next? You're going to tell people they have to cover their hair? Where are we going with this? And I brought it up. And you know what? I was called racist. I was, all the haters came out. But the haters are the ones that are on the internet all day, just waiting to whine and complain. And that's who we listen to now. And I'm not really sure why, but I think cooler heads need to prevail, and maybe people who have seen other things, because most of these people hadn't ever seen other cultures. They didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't even know. Maybe I'm part of that culture. You don't know. You don't know where I'm from, right?
Right.
But they assume, and yeah, it was disgusting. And the whole thing, also to go back to the hysteria, the people that around me in California, the majority of them were so terrified. They wouldn't let their children out of the house. I mean, I saw little children that wrote on their windows, "When can I go to the outside?" I mean,
Oh,
it was really disgusting. And we would take our kids just down the street, walking by the way, it was like in the summer, it's like 115 there. There's no
right.
virus that's going to survive that kind of heat. And we would walk out on the street just to get our kids out of the house, and people would call the police because we weren't wearing a mask.
No, for real?
And they would. Yeah, we found out they were. But the police were like, they had more important things to deal with, I'm sure, than some children not wearing masks. And by the way, my kids were 3 and 6.
Oh my goodness.
So I mean, don't even get me started on that. But
What are you going to do now in the fall? Because are you in the county where
no, we escaped. We escaped. Yeah.
you escape? Yeah, that's good. But do you feel like like a federal mask mandate is coming to schools again?
Well, I can say if it does, a lot of people will be disenrolling their children. It's already happening. Actually, enrollments in public schools are way down.
Yeah.
You don't hear about it in the news, of course, but they're way down. And I think a lot of people are, I mean, I feel bad for the people who can't work at home. This means someone has to stay home with the children, right? And who is that usually?
Right.
It's usually the female. And again, going back to these countries where women were made to all of a sudden abandon their professions, cover up. Yeah, it just, I don't know if a mandate does happen. I'm in the free state of Florida, so
That's a good move. That's a good
luckily
move.
I have some protections. But and the thing is, even when all this stuff happened and the governors were mandating whatever they decided to mandate, I thought the president had more say, and I was hoping, well, oh no, he won't support that. But he couldn't do anything because the governors had all the power.
Right.
So now it goes back to, well, if they start saying, no, you have to because the president, well, that wasn't how it went with the mask mandate and everything else that we suffered through. So I hope that Florida wouldn't, I'm not
Well, no,
wearing
you
one.
guys have DeSantis, so you're safe. You're probably among the only truly safe residents
Yeah.
of this country because you have DeSantis standing between you and the lunacy, and that guy is going about. I saw a clip of a talk he did recently where he was explaining that a significant amount of people who are pouring through the borders are being delivered to Florida and dropped off
Yes.
in Florida.
Yeah.
And then I saw something
that.
about the raging cases in Florida, and I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
well, let's look at this. A, are the cases truly cases? Because now we have
Mhm.
the recall on the testing strips, right? That
Mhm.
are proven to be incorrect and inaccurate. And God knows how many false positives have been out there because of those
Mhm.
faulty strips, which are just now conveniently locating. And then you have all these people being dumped off in Florida who are not vaccinated anyway, like
Yeah.
whether you believe in the vaccine or you don't believe
Right.
in the
Right.
vaccine or whatever. But let's look at the facts. But I think you guys are lucky you have DeSantis. But if he runs for president, you might lose him.
I know. That's what yeah. Well, I
But
think
you'll have
yeah.
but imagine him on a federal level.
Right. Right. But again, the Trump wasn't able to do anything with the mask mandate. I don't think he believed in a mask mandate for everybody. And it still happened where I was, and it was
Yeah.
allowed to happen. And
Do you
now it's
think
happening again.
that Florida will get, I mean, I can't see Florida voting in a Democrat governor
I'm
anyway.
not sure. Last time it looked like it was close for the guy that then was found passed out on drugs at a hotel room. That's what I don't
Which
know.
one is that? Are you talking about
I'm
Hunter
not
Biden?
sure.
I didn't know Hunter Biden ran for
I'm not.
governor
Yeah, he was
of
like
Florida.
that sort of. But then again, I
Right.
think it's all. I don't believe what I see on the news. I don't know what's the truth and what's not. Like you have to dig even deeper
You do.
to find any
do.
truth at all.
And does your experience in the CIA, does that have, like, did you learn about, were you exposed to anything? Like, are you aware of how true misinformation campaigns or
Oh
psychological
yeah,
warfare or
yeah.
like, do you see
It-
any of
I
that?
of course we weren't. The CIA was not supposed to be doing any of that type of thing in the U.S. That's not
Right.
their. They're supposed to be overseas, right? But
Right,
I
right,
guess
right.
around the time I left, well, I left in 2011, and I honestly, when I was there, I wasn't really involved in any political. I didn't really even pay attention. I was young, and I was, as you saw in the book, I was having a lot of fun with different men, and I was
Yeah.
having the time of my life in that area. But so I didn't pay attention. I'm sure some of it was going on then, but since 2011 and probably around 2008, it probably got worse
Obama.
there
Yeah.
that way. I mean, I'm not sure. I wasn't paying. All I remember when I was
Yeah.
leaving was when Petraeus was in.
Mhm.
He had just come in, and there was the scandal with him. Who knows now what was the truth and what's not. I don't even know. But yes, I know that there is a propaganda campaigns and things like that, that it does happen. And I think I've never thought I would see it in this country, but I think it is what's for sure going on right now.
Right. And you know what people are saying if they, or what people would say to you, if a lot of people would say to you if they heard you say that, right? They would just
Oh, yeah.
a
Well,
crazy
I'm QAnon.
yes,
QAnon. Is
yes,
that who
you're
it is?
cute.
Yeah. Whoever that is.
I was told by somebody who'd known me for years and years and years, he just lost his ever loving mind on
Hmm.
me and told me that I was in a cult, that Dave had looped me into a cult and we were just sheer evil and conspiracy theorists. And I should be ashamed of this woman who knew my husband, who my
Yeah.
husband sort of took care of while this
Hmm.
guy was training up underneath him. And told me that my husband would be ashamed of me because of, and
Oh,
I was
geez.
like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, man," he
Yeah.
like just went
I
there, right?
know. Yeah.
But and he's full of crap. He has literally no clue what he's talking about.
Hmm.
But that happens over and over. And why do you think it is that people now feel it is so okay to just launch these attacks on one another, but yet, express outrage if that is turned back
Yeah.
around on them?
Well, I think a lot of it comes from social media. And while I like social media for, say, marketing a book, even though nobody sees my posts, but I
I
like
know, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I like the way it maybe could help with business, or maybe it used to, but now,
Right.
it's not. But I think now we've got all these people with too much time on their hands that just think everybody cares about. And before it was like when they took a poop or they went to the store or whatever. And I always kind of made fun of it in general because I never was like that.
Right.
And then now it's more like what everyone's mad at. And I mean, I came from the land of outrage. Out there, you learn from an early age what politically correct is, and you kind of get indoctrinated into it. Luckily, I had lived other places. I lived in Thailand. I lived all over. I lived in Florida. So I have kind of a broader view. But you do get indoctrinated a bit, and you don't really realize it till later. But yeah,
Yeah.
I know exactly when someone says something conservative, I always know exactly what the liberal response would
Yes.
be. I know exactly the outrage that will come out.
Right. Very predictable.
It's a skill now.
Yeah, it
But
is a skill. It's almost like a requirement, right? And that's not just people who disagree and have like views to the moderate, but we're talking about people who are just like next level,
mhm.
just
Oh yeah.
invested. And I feel like a
Yep.
lot of what I have been accused of is actually a reflection of that person
Yeah. Oh,
themselves,
for sure. Yeah.
because all I've done is ask questions. I ask
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what you think. Why? Like, tell me
Right.
why. Somebody give me a good reason why I should apologize for being white.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Somebody give me a good reason why I should feel guilty. I myself should feel personally responsible
Yeah.
for any racism in this country, and like I should bear personal responsibility for atrocities that have happened. Um, Not to
Mhm.
say that I have, as if I had participated in them. I think
Right. Right.
that's the difference I'm looking at. I've been accused as if I participated,
Oh yeah.
willingly participated in these
Yeah.
things, which anyone who knows me knows never, ever, ever,
No. No.
which the majority of Americans are, just like that, right? So, when I ask questions is when I get attacked. Well, okay,
Hmm.
why? You don't like
Oh yeah.
Trump. Okay, why don't you like Trump? Well, he's obnoxious and he says this. Okay, but let's
Right.
get into his policies. Like I can say, I see imperfections, but I'd rather an imperfect person doing good things
Right.
for the country than an
Right.
imperfect person with evil intentions for the country. That's just me.
Well, yeah,
Right?
and I remember me. I was attacked. I was told one. I have blood on my hands, which I'm not sure why. I think it was around the COVID thing. And by the way, that's been around now. What, a year and a half, maybe over. We don't know.
Right.
We probably already had it,
Right.
And well, we know we did actually. But so it's like it's insanity. And then the racist thing. A lot of the people that were suddenly screaming that I was racist or whoever I knew was racist simply because they're Caucasian or appear to be Caucasian.
Hmm.
Um, they were all white women that were doing it. I have to say, it kind of harkens back to the CIA days when the people attacking me were all
I
women.
Yeah, and I have digressed you so far from that. Let's get back to that because you had some crazy stuff happening there in the CIA offices, like actually people just full on sabotaging your
Hmm.
career. I had a
Yeah.
dose of that at the county level. When I had a county job, I had a female supervisor who was off her rocker and
Mhm.
literally openly proudly stated that she was sabotaging me because she didn't like me. Like openly
Yeah.
said it. Like yes,
Yeah.
she was sabotaging me. She didn't care if it hurt the
Yeah.
people I was serving as long as she admitted it. But and she was cool with that. I
Yeah.
did not expect that at
No.
this CIA level.
You wouldn't, but I have to say it was more concentrated than any other workplace I've ever seen. The viciousness and mostly just the women. There were some men that were like that, but it was more the women. Not, and I don't hate anybody. I don't hate women now. Now it's going to be, oh, you hate women and
Yeah.
but I don't.
Right.
But this is truthfully what happened. And these people just came at me. And by the way, in that book, I censored out a lot by myself. I didn't put a lot of things in. Maybe there'll be a sequel one day when I'm much older. But yeah, I mean, they were just
Yeah.
people that just didn't like me. And I didn't even know who a lot of these people were. I had no
Right.
idea. I would just hear it would trickle down later or even while it was happening. I had no idea. They'd explain, oh, they know who you are. Well, I had no idea. It was all these cubicle warriors, we call it,
Yeah.
that just didn't like me because I had
Free.
blonde hair, whatever reason there was. Yeah, there were discussions about my hair color. There were, you read it,
Yeah.
that weren't appropriate. And that's not an appropriate conversation. And
Right.
coming from outraged California, because I did move to DC from California also, I knew the outrage. And yeah, it was very strange. And I would assume it's gotten much worse since I was there.
You'd like to think it's better, right?
I would
You'd like
hope,
to say
but
it's so interesting to me that you didn't just say, I would assume it's gotten better, but no, your assumption is it's gotten worse, which is super interesting.
yeah.
And it's real, I think. I think it's real and it's a little sad and it's crazy. I have a son. One of my sons is at college now, heading into his junior year and fully committed to becoming the absolute top ballistics expert in the FBI. That's
Okay.
his goal. Um, I have mixed feelings about the brain, the service
Yeah.
he's choosing to go into, but I'm fully there and supporting my son in any way. Do you have any insight for somebody like him who is moving towards a career path in one of these government agencies?
I think it's worthwhile to do still, even though you're probably gonna find some strange things. I think as a male going in, you wouldn't have any problems, and you'd actually get to be a specialist in something. So it would be something good for a single female. I hate to say it. It just you saw. I mean, you're going to be brutalized. So the married females were treated much differently.
Oh,
They were more respected. I have friends still. We still talk about it. That just how if you were married and a female, it was okay. But if you were single, you were just picked out and singled out all the time. Without, I didn't even know most of the time it was happening. So I think it would be fine for him to
I
go
don't know
into
if
it.
that makes me happy or sad. I mean, as his mom, that makes me happy, but to hear
Yeah.
and the fact that my initial reaction inside when you said that was like, oh, thank God. And then I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, why would
No, well,
like, that is not okay. But like, I think that's also very telling on human nature, right? That was my first
yeah.
instinct, total transparency. My first instinct when
Yeah.
you said that was, oh, thank
No,
God
of
my son will
course.
be okay. And then, common sense and just,
Yeah.
I don't know, morals, I guess, caught up with me there in that nanosecond afterwards where I was like, that's actually not okay.
Now,
A sick,
FBI might be different because you actually have to learn. Like CIA does not carry guns. They're not. We did learn firearms, but that was only because I was in security for a brief stint.
right.
But most of the people there, they don't know how to use a gun. It's not like Hollywood. But FBI and DEA and those, you actually do, and you have a skill that is important. I'm not saying there aren't skilled people at the CIA, but just remember when I said I wanted to learn ethical hacking, they had no idea what I was talking about.
What do you mean
Now,
by that?
when I was getting ready to either resign or get another assignment, which I had wanted to get another assignment, I asked if there was some way I could do some ethical hacking training because I really wanted to get into something more specific where I'd have a skill. And the people that in the management just had no idea what that was. I know some people there do know what it is.
What
It's
is
a
it? I don't
huge
know what it is.
agency.
Yeah.
It's when you learn how to hack, but you're on the good side of it. You're not doing like the hacking for bad reasons. You're doing it for like
Ooh,
security
but who
reasons.
determines? Who determines what's good and bad
Well,
hacking?
yeah, of course you could always go bad, but
Yeah.
I think it's a skill. It's a great skill, and I've learned it outside of the agency. But I just thought, well, why not learn it? Why not train someone? And if they want to learn something, help them.
Right.
It wasn't just me. I mean, there were plenty of kids there, 25. They got to do whatever they wanted. When we were closing our office where it was, they would let all these kids hang out. They were going to let them just hang out on their laptops and pay them, by the way, pay for their living, pay for everything. We all lived in beautiful oceanfront condos. But when I asked to do it, it was like, oh no, you have to come back to Washington, D.C. and do the same job you were doing before, but we don't have a job for you yet. I was going to be taken up there and I would sit in a room until I found a job, which is what they
Wow.
did for all the blacklisted people. If you weren't
Oh
in
my,
favor, you would
oh
probably
my
sit
God.
there with some very angry woman over you, probably. I just knew where it was going.
Right.
And yeah, I wasn't going to do that. So I left. But the point is, like, they were willing to do training and these things for all these other people, but me, it was like no. It was like was I was insane. So
Wow.
yeah.
Fascinating, Shelley. Really fascinating. Like so many different angles and avenues. And I can hear some people saying one thing and they're screaming one thing at
Mhm.
this interview, another set screaming another. Like, I mean, even everything you're saying is going to stir up emotion one side or another. And some people are going to be believing you and cheering for you. And other people are going to be like, well, she must have done something to
Yeah,
deserve
right.
it,
I don't think so.
Um,
Well,
make
it was 10 years ago. So
yeah.
I was very, not to sound egotistic, I was very pretty and people always noticed me wherever I was. Even, I've always been shy. So nobody knew really what I was thinking. So I always get well, she's snobby or she's this
Yeah,
or
yeah.
that because they don't know me. They've never
Right.
talked to me. So that was a lot of the problem. A lot of people have that problem, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
nowadays, I mean, I'm older, I have kids. I just tell the truth, but I get the same reaction from a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. What do you hope happens with the recall election in California?
I hope they get rid of Newsom for sure.
Do you think it's
I
possible?
didn't. I think it's always possible, but that state definitely has a one-party system, and they don't allow the Republicans to even do anything in their legislature. I have a friend who tracks their legislature, and I know they don't let the other side do anything. So, and
How
that's basically what's happening at a larger scale in this country now.
yeah.
So,
What do you
um,
think we can do to trust in our elections?
well, I think it worked good before all this COVID. I thought it worked okay. Maybe I'm sure there was some fraud now that we see, but the fraud, I think. Oops, I'm not supposed to talk about that. The
No.
fraud
It's okay.
this time, I think was huge. I do. I think it was huge,
Yeah.
and in California, I think the fraud has probably always been there because I did meet a lot of Republicans out there that would never have voted. They all were voting for Trump for sure. I mean, more than you would think out there. But
Yeah.
they're definitely silent out there because you can't say you like Trump, you can't agree with anything, or you'll get shouted down and fired, and
What do you
you're
think would happen if every American who felt like that went ahead, spoke up anyway, got fired, got
Mhm.
blacklisted, and then regrouped to support each other and start new businesses or get hired in new places. Like, what in my mind, I feel like we have to, unless we're willing to take some hits along the way, like Dave
Yeah.
and I, and you writing for Ops Lens, you're putting
Mhm.
a target on yourself as
Yeah.
well. We have a target on ourselves. Our posts are squashed, we're suppressed, we're shadowed, we're
Yeah. Yeah.
squished down. I watch other people doing some of the same things we're doing and they're skyrocketing up because they're not speaking, but they'll say to me, oh, I'm
Yeah.
not going to go say that on my platform because I don't want to be squashed. I'm like, well, what if we
Mhm.
all just did it
I know.
anyway and took the hits? I'm missing family events because, they'll put me in a mask and I'll be the only one there in a mask because,
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
exercising my physical
Yeah.
autonomy over, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm not going to have your little passport of approval there. So I'm like, I'm not going to go be in a mask, right? And I'm losing opportunities. I have people who don't want to work with us. We have a much harder time getting our voice out on social media than
Mhm.
most other
Mhm.
people, but we're doing it anyway and we're connecting with other people. So what do you think, like, and I know it's easy for me to say, go ahead and get fired, go ahead and start the other job. But I really
Yeah,
sort
I
of wish,
know.
I feel
Yeah.
like if you're not willing to do that now, we're going to suffer much greater consequences down the line. Maybe
Yes.
not in our generation, but our grandchildren will, like
Yeah. Well, my
s-
children for sure
your
will.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe my kids too. So that's sort of
Mhm.
where I'm at now. And I'm really just discovering that more and more as I'm kind of challenged and prodded more. What are your thoughts on that? Right? It's hard. It's it's hard
Yeah.
to say.
I'm lucky. Like and that's the thing. Like I took a huge risk leaving the agency in 2011. I didn't have a job lined up. I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And I had about a year's worth of money for rent, right? But that was it. And I took a giant risk. And it was because I didn't like the way things were going. And I decided, well, it's my life and I get to change what I want to change in my life. And I just did it. And that's how I am. I just kind of do it. And eventually you make it work, even if it's hard. And, and I understand for some people it would be much harder. I didn't have kids. I didn't have any responsibility. But if you don't like what environment you're in and it's a poisonous environment, then I say take the risk and get out and do something else. You can always go somewhere, learn a new skill. Like I learned new skills. I did new things. I tried like a lot of different things. And it ended up working out because 10 years later, I mean, I'm living in my dream location without saying exactly where it is. Um, and I have two kids. I'm older, and you can do it. There's so many people, even to get off on another 39, they were saying, "Oh, you won't be able to have a child, right?" Most people, because they just believe that you have to be 30 and then that's what you do. And then after that, you can't have kids. There's a lot of
Right.
people that believe that. Well, I didn't ever buy into any of that. I just did what I thought I was going to do, and it all worked out. You can't listen to other people. You have to make your own decision. And I mean, I was the queen of being attacked, and I probably still am, but now I just don't care really.
Isn't that liberating when
Yeah,
you just realize that it's just wasted energy? Um,
it's the
you know,
40s, I guess. You just start not caring, or nearing 50.
yeah. Yeah, I care a lot. Not that I don't care. Of course I care, but I don't
Yeah,
care to the part that it like wounds me or impacts me or stops
no,
me or makes me doubt myself. So, yeah, that is super interesting. All right. Here's a question I got to ask you because it's part of what
okay.
we do and a question that I love to ask. Part of why we started American Snippets years ago is when we first felt this crack appearing,
Mhm.
in our foundation. And part of what came under assault was the American dream, the notion of the American dream.
Mhm.
And, I didn't serve in our country at all, really, in any capacity, but I did
Well, you
lose
did.
my husband who served,
Yeah,
and that makes it very personal for me. And so
yeah.
I started to feel like I needed to do something to prove that what he died for and what so many other people are serving and sacrificing for in so many different capacities was, in fact, a reality. And that is the American dream. We just make sure to clarify that the American dream, and you've touched on this already, is different for everybody. It's not having all the kids by the time you're 25 and the white picket fence and the car in the driveway in 2 weeks a year, right? It looks different for everyone. And you've exemplified that yourself. So we know what the American dream means to us, and I'd love to hear what it means to you.
I would say doing what you want to do for the most part. With, I mean, not, within reason, but like if you like to write, I like to write. I made a career out of writing now. It takes a while to get sometimes where you want to be, but just the risk is worthwhile. I think focus on something that you really like doing and then try to make a life out of that, you know,
Love it. Love it.
as much as you can.
If people want to see your writing or buy any of your books, because you have several books out there, and
Yeah.
that is super cool. Where can they go to do that?
Well, they're available on Amazon, of course, Barnes and Noble, all the different booksellers, Smashwords. Actually, they're free right now on Smashwords till the end of the month.
What are those books?
All of them.
Oh,
They're
all
all.
of,
I have
so there's
nine.
okay. Shoot out some of the titles.
Okay, so Single in the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Mingling in the CIA series, which is it's all real short. Mission Stand Down, which is probably my best book. And then I have two children's picture books, Mommy Thinks She's a Monster and The Lemon Seed. And then a new children's chapter book series called The Adventures of Shelley Beach. So
Love,
that the first one just came out. So I
love
thought,
it.
yeah.
Love it. All right.
Oh, and ShellyMateer.com. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. I was literally just going to say, to throw that in because I saw that before as well. Shelley, Mateer.com. And we're going to put that link in an article, just below this podcast on our website for everybody to connect with you and pick up some of your books and learn more about you. And you can also catch Shelley's writing, really good writing, on opslens.com. It's OPSLENS.com. It's a site created and run by another former CIA officer, Ron Hammond, our mutual friend. And it has some really, really great stuff on there. So I'd encourage everybody to check that out as well. Shelley, thank you really so much for taking the
Thank
time to
you
sit
very
down with
much.
us today.
Thank you.